Welcome to hour number 2, live right here on this Wednesday on the early line on SportsGrid and all across the Spiz Grizz network. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. 2 more hours to go up until 11 a.m. Eastern time, all across the grid. There is so much basketball to get to. A monumental Wednesday slate in college hoops. We have the ending of a regular season at the high major level. We also have mid-major conference tournaments already underway. Madness in March at the ASUN tournament. 2 of the top 3 seeds, Lipscomb, the 3 seed, the 1 seed, Eastern Kentucky, already sent packing. It has been a wild start to conference tournament week at the mid-major level here in college hoops. We'll get into the NBA and some NFL news and notes following franchise tag day in the National Football League. All of that, 2 more hours to go up until 11 a.m. Eastern.
And by the way, some of these smaller conferences playing to a live studio audience of like 3 people, which is always interesting to watch here. But the home court advantage certainly not showing up in the ASUN. The reason why you fight so long and win so many games during the regular season is, hey, the road goes through us. Apparently not. Bad basketball teams on the road against better basketball teams handling their business, which also included a game last night where Detroit Mercy, a 1-win basketball team, almost upset one of the best teams in their conference play. So wildness already with the dancing shoes. And by the way, come Saturday, there's going to be some automatic qualifiers already headed to the dance.
That was the opening round of the Horizon League Conference tournament. So much madness. Eastern Kentucky goes down to Jacksonville. The Dolphins are jumping for joy out of water as we welcome in our SportsGrid radio audience here. Hour number 2 of a Wednesday live right here on the early line, Sirius XM Channel 159. All of our radio terrestrial affiliates now in the mix as well. He is Donnie. I am Ben. Some news and notes around the National Football League. It was franchise tag day, the end of the 2-week franchise tag window in the National Football League. We looked at the 9 players now placed under the tag, some of the notable names that were not, that will get to test free agency, and here are a few more that will join them, not placed under the tag, but released yesterday by the Seattle Seahawks. Both of their starting safeties, Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. It saves the Seahawks more than $34 million in cap space under the new regime led by Mike McDonald. Big moves up in the Pacific Northwest.
No, yeah, this is what you expect, though, because quality football players, yes. But the one thing also, let's start with Seattle. Seattle made one of the worst trades you're going to see over the past decade in the NFL by getting Jamal Adams from the Jets. Unbelievably paid a ton for him here and, quite frankly, didn't produce really what they wanted out of him. So when you take a look at Russell Wilson then going as a trade from Seattle over to Denver, you made that back up and more. So you call that maybe even and maybe a little bit on the plus side. But you got a defensive coordinator. That's one of the very best in the business. You got to let him work here. If he's going to look at that roster and say the changes I need are coverage safeties as opposed to hard-hitting linebacker forming safeties here, you got to let him make those decisions here. Pete Carroll's out of town, a new regime's in town. Yeah. Maybe they can resurrect some sort of Legion of Boom number 2 here with McDonald as the defensive coordinator and head coach, but nobody's looking at these 2 moves going like, oh man, I can't believe Seattle actually moved on from these 2 guys. No, it was anticipated, and that's a lot of cap savings here that they can spend in free agency.
Exactly. It's all a part of adding to your cap room and what it could mean for the future of a franchise, a new regime after nearly a decade and a half under Pete Carroll. Now, I think the Seahawks are going to be a fascinating win total to study. Plus 750 for Seattle right now in the NFC West. That is the 3rd best price out of 4 teams. Only the Cardinals at 11-1 have a longer number in the division. 30-1 for Seattle to win the NFC Championship. 2 years ago, Donnie, with Geno Smith, when Seattle so overperformed on expectation, entering 2022, the win total for the Seahawks was 5.5. They ended up being a wild card team in the NFC. Last year, win total 8.5. They flirted with a playoff spot, ended up going over the win total, but did not see the postseason. What do you think that win total is going to look like for Seattle in 2024?
It'll be interesting because, the past couple of years it was hard to gauge what you would get out of Seattle. And I was quite low on them here. And Geno Smith 2 years ago played very well, got himself that contract extension, was decent again last year on a decent Seattle Seahawks team. But there usually is a transition phase once you get a new head coach. And also that head coach is going to say, you know what, I'm more of a defensive guy. Now, the one thing we needed the Seattle Seahawks to do is come into the 21st century with an offensive passing game. Pete Carroll loved to draft running back after running back after running back because they wanted to run the football. It'd be nice to see if Geno Smith was in a pure passing offense with those electric wide receivers that they do have. But I'm actually more optimistic this year than I was last year on the Seattle Seahawks because I was waiting for the Pete Carroll regime to be over. I thought it might have been done last year. But now I get a true defensive coordinator that's going to mold that defense the way he sees fit. Now, do we expect him, Ben, to have a Baltimore Ravens-style defense right out of the gate? No, that's going to take a year or two to get his guys in the building. But you see he's already making those changes to some of those locker room leaders, and it'll be interesting to see who they bring in on the back end here. So for me, Seattle, I do think, again, it's not a knock on them. I think they're a third-place team in the NFC West here. And if I'm putting a team total on Seattle, it's probably going to come in for me around that 8 to 8.5 range because I do think the Rams are better, and I do think the San Francisco 49ers are better on day one here. But it's one of those teams you might be optimistic on the future. Find that franchise guy. Maybe it's a younger quarterback that you look for this year. Let Geno have that one last season, and then you take your team into the next couple of years as legitimate playoff contenders. They're just outside of playoff status for me, but I like the trend of the Seattle Seahawks here, Ben.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be 7.5. The over might have a slight bit of the juice for the Seahawks, and I think 8 wins is probably a pretty fair barometer for Mike Macdonald in his rookie campaign as Seattle's head coach. Some more contract news yesterday, not a franchise tag, but a long-term deal for the tight end for the Texans. That is Dalton Schultz. After his first year in Houston, following the start of his career in Dallas, a 3-year, $36 million new contract for Schultz with the Texans. That includes $23.5 million guaranteed. It says right there from NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, Schultz was a key weapon for C.J. Stroud in his rookie year. 5 touchdown grabs, 635 yards in his first year with Houston, but 88 targets for Dalton Schultz last year. Second on the team, Donnie, only behind Nico Collins. So yes, indeed, he is a prime target for C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, they have some money to spend, and you want to add on. You don't want to subtract and then say, okay, well, let's make up for it. You see the rapport that the quarterback and the tight end had last year, and also you see how much Dallas missed a really good tight end on their end of the bargain as well. So I like the fact that he's staying there. Now add on. We talked about already some of the tagged guys and non-tagged guys, particularly the running back position. Give me a first-rate running back there. Add on at the wide receiver position, because right now you got the lion by the tail down there. That's a good football team that you had a couple more talented playmakers on offense, and maybe you're talking about making a run, not just to win that division, but maybe an AFC championship game appearance.
Some new markets available for the NFL draft following Combine weekend in Indy. The odds-on favorite, a hefty odds-on favorite at minus 230 to go 4th overall. That's the wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., the favorite right now to be the 5th overall pick, the big offensive tackle out of Notre Dame, Joe Alt. We will have more conference tournament previews next. The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This is
the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to
Penn
find
State's
a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But
Right.
if we make them a third,
They get in.
this
is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to be
rule.
better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The Bucks are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
this
Late
sort
Night.
of has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
You could not ask for more in the month of March from what we have already seen during mid-major conference tournament week in men's college basketball. Look at the A-Sun yesterday. The top seed Eastern Kentucky on its home floor at EKU. They had not lost a home game in regular season conference action. They host Jacksonville, who survived a couple of nights ago, who had not won a road game in regular season conference action. The Finns go into Eastern Kentucky and knock off the top overall seed in the A-Sun. Lipscomb, the 3rd overall seed, gets beat last night as well. 2 of the top 3 seeds in the A-Sun tournament already bounced. We're back into semifinal action on a Thursday in the A-Sun. Almost madness in the Horizon League, which sets the stage for 3 more mid-major conferences to enter the fun and the chaos that is conference tournament week right now. On this Wednesday, the Ohio Valley Conference will begin its conference tournament. The Big South and the Northeast will join as well. And DRS, when you look at the top of the Ohio Valley this year, there was a 3-way tie for the top spot. 3 teams at 14-4. Morehead State, Little Rock, and UT Martin. It's why you see their 3 prices, plus 115 for Morehead State, plus 190 for Little Rock, and plus 450 for UT Martin. But the number 1 overall seed, technically, in the OVC tournament, that would be Little Rock, followed by UT Martin. They get buys all the way to the semifinals. Morehead State, a bye into tomorrow's quarterfinal actions, despite being booked as the favorite.
And by the way, when you're taking a look at these smaller conference tournaments, understand the layout here. As Ben pointed out with the A-Sun yesterday, you know, it was very important there. Teams have the higher seeds home court advantage, which is very important. But also keep in mind, sometimes you get that bounce, right? Like, hey, we already played on your home court and we won yesterday. We're looking forward to playing you today. And it came out in spades in the A-Sun yesterday. But if you take a look at the Ohio Valley, there's 11 teams in conference play. But if you notice the bracket here, only the top 8 actually made it through here to the conference tournament. And also, this conference tournament, even though it is a smaller conference, is all going to be played in one arena. And that's going to be at the Ford Center in Evansville. So also, as we take a look at the smaller conference like the A-Sun, like, okay, you got one bye. Here's the good thing if you're Little Rock here. You got the number 1 seed. You get a double bye along with UT Martin.
Yeah.
So you don't even have to play, which means, Ben, you only got to win 2 games in this tournament to cut down the nets. I love to see this because some of the arguments that we have so many times in these smaller conferences, how could this be fair? They played 16 regular season games. This team went 15-1, then got knocked out because they didn't play a good quality basketball game 2 games into the tournament, and they're going home. At least this conference is basically telling you, hey, look, the regular season really means something. You get 2 free games before you have to play anybody here because that's the fruit that you get from having a great conference year here. I'm looking forward to the way this tournament shapes up. But again, understand the tournament. It's neutral site, double buys for the top 2 teams here, and away you go.
So when you look at those top 2 teams, by the way, very different styles in terms of UT Martin, one of the fastest 15 tempos in college basketball. Little Rock a little bit more in the middle. When you look at Morehead State, the favorites right now, a slower tempo 334. That's bottom 30 in the country. You could take that into the overs and the unders for Ohio Valley Conference tournament play. Again, Morehead State, a much more difficult path by having to play 1 extra game, despite all 3 of those teams at the top finishing 14-4 in OVC play so far this year. Tennessee State, a 3.5-point favorite against Southern Indiana to get things started on this Wednesday. The other game, Eastern Illinois, that's a 2.5-point spread against SIU Edwardsville, a 2.5-point number in favor of SIU. Now we go to the Big South Conference, where High Point is the number 1 seed in the pretty sure favorite, plus 105, approaching even money. Drew Pember is back for UNC Asheville. He is a stud, plus 290 there for UNC Asheville. Winthrop at 7-1 and Gardner-Webb 8-1. DRS, those are the 4 teams with 3 digits in their prices to try to win the Big South tournament and get a bid to the NCAA tournament as well.
And also, let's take a look at this tournament here. Keep in mind, the number 1 overall seed is High Point. You know where the entire tournament is going to be played this year for the Big South? High Point University. Home court advantage is key here. Also, we just told you about a conference that says, we're going to leave out the bottom 3 teams here, as some of these conferences do. There's 9 teams in the Big South. All 9 teams will be participating in this tournament here as it gets wrapped up. But if, again, you're looking at those buys here, only looks like the 8 and the 9 are going to play each other, and then everybody else sort of filters in. So really, everybody's getting that sort of first-round bye because you don't have to avoid it, but you're also looking at High Point playing the lowest seed possible to get it started on their home court. You take a look at some of those odds here. That's why they're a plus 105 here in this tournament at the FanDuel Sportsbook, and you take a look at UNC Asheville at a plus 290 price. It's nice to have it on your home court, but again, as we said, you fill up with fans, you're used to the shooting angles, but UC Upstate and Radford are going to play a game on your home court there. They should win that. They'll be comfortable with the sight lines and the routine already. But if High Point can get past that first game, it should be, I don't want to say smooth sailing. That's not fair. They're not that big of a favorite. But on your home court, you got a game under your belt and already won. They probably should take the tournament.
So Radford is the 9 seed. Again, that is the bottom seed out of the 9 that have made the conference tournament. They were 5-11 in conference play, as was South Carolina Upstate. And yet tonight, Radford, the Highlanders, in the only game that will start action in the Big South Conference tournament, a 4.5-point favorite against SC Upstate. The winner of that will take on the top seed in High Point. Again, maybe keep an eye on UNC Asheville as you look at the bracket. They are the 2. They would be on the other side. They take on Charleston Southern. Those games in quarterfinal action are on Friday in the Big South. High Point, by the way, will be in action noon Eastern time in the Big South quarterfinal matchup come Friday. The other conference tournament that starts things today, the NEC, that is the Northeast. And take a look at these odds. Merrimack and Central Connecticut, 2 teams that are separated by just 25 cents, plus 110 for Merrimack, plus 135 for Central Connecticut. Then we have a very large drop-off DRS to Sacred Heart at 10-1.
It's a 9-team conference, and also looks like getting the short end of the stick here is Stonehill, Ben, not deserving. 4-27 on the season, 2-14 in conference play. They won't be participating here in the tournament. Also, again, setting the stage here for how the NEC is played. You take a look at this. All games are held on the campus sites of the higher seeds here. So if you're the number 1 overall seed, as you take a look at Central Connecticut, if things go your way, every game will be at home. That's certainly a distinct advantage. Now, when you're trying to handicap conferences and what you like, look, we understand the high majors and the Power 5 conferences here have the elite athletes, which means you can get some great tempo and a lot of fun and efficient offenses. If you want efficient offenses, the NEC is not the conference to go to, Ben. Take a look at this. Merrimack, this is the adjusted offenses based on KenPom, which basically 360 or so teams that we have. 313, 272, 247, 284, 310, 341, 349, 346, and Stonehill was left out at 355. Close your eyes and bet unders? Is that what we're finding here in this tournament?
So, DRS, KenPom also ranks conferences that we have around the country in college basketball, all 33, including the independents. The Northeast Conference has the worst overall rating at negative 13.67. It is not a great offensive conference by any means, so you would look at defense. Who is the best defense in the conference? That is Merrimack, and by a pretty considerable margin. 78th overall in the country. The only defense that ranks in the top 195, Central Connecticut, second best at 199. No buys for any of these teams today. So Central Connecticut, a 13.5-point favorite against St. Francis. They are the number 1 seed. Merrimack, a 14.5-point favorite against LIU. By the way, Central Connecticut this year, 17-10 against the spread, the best cover team in the NEC. Was that all you needed from the conference tournament rundown that we have this week and these games starting on this Wednesday? I hope so. We might see some chaos, though. We've already seen some chaos. Look no further than the A-Sun. 2 of the top 3 seeds already bounced. Everybody, this means everything. A shot to go dancing if you win your conference tournament. We'll talk more college hoops up next.
Introducing Sports Injury Central's new feature, the Injury Edge, your NFL matchup cheat sheet. See all the significant injury mismatches broken down by offense and defense to highlight where the advantages lie. All for only $2.99 a week. How can you even consider making a bet or setting your fantasy lineup without knowing the injury mismatches? Go to sixscore.com today and get this week's Injury Edge.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight You may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort
Night.
of has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I knew that. Live right here on this Wednesday on the early line on SportsGrid. It is the middle of mid-major conference tournament week in men's college basketball. The high major levels still rounding out a regular season. We win with Zinn each and every week, even on this Wednesday. I am Ben. Donnie's on the right side, and Mark Zinno is the man in the middle. Here with some college hoops handicaps to begin. A huge Wednesday night slate as we look back on Tuesday. He'll stay with us for a second consecutive segment going around the National Football League early in the offseason as well. Mark Zinno, we appreciate your time here on this Wednesday on the early line.
Gentlemen, great to be with you as always. We are upon conference tournaments, which is a great time to try and leverage some good teams and start getting your futures in now for the NCAA tournament.
That is certainly the case. Are we going to bet any teams out of the Big Ten? The conference as a whole has not won a national championship in over 2 decades, since the year 2000 and Michigan State. And Purdue is trying to change every narrative around that basketball program as well, getting to its first Final Four since 1980. Purdue is starting to look the part. Last night, a top 15 tilt in Champaign. 3rd-ranked Purdue, 12th-ranked Illinois. The Boilermakers, Zinno, a 2.5-point road underdog, down by 6 at the break, rally in the second half, 77-71 to win their second consecutive outright Big Ten regular season title. What did that second half effort out of the Boilermakers show you about Purdue?
I mean, I don't think it showed us anything we didn't know, that they're a really good and competent basketball team. But doing it in Champaign, Illinois in the first week of March is a completely different thing than doing it in the NCAA tournament. And that's really the issue for Purdue. I mean, you know, look, if you go up and down Purdue's schedule here, we've seen them come up small in a couple of moments this year, Ben, where it makes you scratch your head and go, I don't know if I really like that team to win this whole thing. I mean, you know, they do have a couple of head scratchers on their schedule that make you wonder. I mean, the loss at Nebraska, you know, the loss at Ohio State. I suppose you could argue situationally those were spots where, you know, they shouldn't or could have lost those games for a variety of reasons. But, you know, again, it doesn't matter what they do at this point. For them, it matters for 6 game in March. They're going to be a number 1 seed, whether they win the Big Ten or not. I mean, even at worst, and look, maybe it's better if they're not a number 1 seed. Maybe it's better if they're a 2 seed and people aren't looking at them as the team to go out and win it all after losing to a 16 seed last year. But they've got to prove they can do it for 6 games in March. Anything less than that almost, you know, hate to say it, but feels a little bit like a failure for Purdue.
Mark, let me ask you about Purdue itself, because so many times we get caught up in what they've done in the past. And you said it basically. They're a really good basketball team this year. Nobody's going to question that. However, do you still need to see something down the stretch here? Which means if they run through the Big Ten and win the championship in the conference tournament, does that give you an extra boost to say, you know what, now I think they're ready? Or how about this? If they falter early in the Big Ten tournament here, does that say, you know what, I can't trust this basketball team? Are you already set with your mindset on Purdue moving forward, or can that option still be changed over the next couple games?
Well, I'll get to your point. I think if they get bounced early, is there a possibility that they don't get a 1 seed and they end up as a 2 seed, right? Like, does that feel like it's a possibility? Whereas, you know, depending on who wins the SEC, depending on who else is there when it's all said and done, maybe even from some of the other conferences that we're looking at, whether it's, you know, 2 Big East teams get up there, or even, you know, does Duke warrant a 1 seed at some point, along with maybe Arizona? If they fall out of that 1 line, I think there's an argument they may get a better path or may get a more favorable path as far as the NCAA tournament is concerned. That's the only real thing I could think. Look, if they lose early in the Big Ten tournament, you know, we're all going to go into this saying they don't really have a shot to win this whole thing. No one's going to believe in them. I guess if you'd like to see at least some better numbers, that national championship odds at 7-1, guys, if they lose in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, guess what? You might get a 10-1, right? You might get a 9 or a 10-1. You might get some better odds, at which point you might want to buy on them just because, again, them losing in the Big Ten tournament has no effect on what they're going to do for 6 games once the tournament starts if they can last that long.
So Purdue won the Big Ten outright regular season title a year ago. Then they went to the Big Ten tournament, won the tournament championship against a sparky Ohio State team as well, and got bounced in the opening round by a 16 seed. Zinno's right. You might find a better number if they lose early in the Big Ten tournament. They'll get the double bye into the quarterfinals, having won the regular season title. But if you haven't bet Purdue now, I don't think there's anything that you can see or Purdue can prove to you that would make you bet them at this juncture. You either want to fade them because of the narrative, which is warranted based on a 40-plus year track record and what happened a season ago, or you believe in this year's team, as I do. It's why I have a 9-1 ticket on the Boilers to win a national championship. A huge top 10 tilt on this Wednesday night in Milwaukee between 8th-ranked Marquette and 2nd-ranked UConn. The Huskies, a 5.5-point road favorite. Part of the reason, Tyler Kolek not going to be out there tonight for the Golden Eagles, the reigning Big East Player of the Year. A marquee matchup for sure, Zinno, but does it lose a little bit of the luster without Kolek on one side for Marquette?
Of course it does. Look, you know me, Ben. There are certain teams, we do this throughout college football season, the NFL. I stake my reputation on certain teams because I believe in them. I believe in Marquette. For a better part of this year, I believe Marquette was the best team in the Big East. I know they got dismantled by UConn last time. I still think this number feels very short. I know college players per se don't necessarily move lines a ton, but for argument's sake, are we going to say that Tyler Kolek might be worth a point and a half? Would this be a 4-point spread if Kolek was playing? Is that fair to say? I wonder how much odds makers are accounting. Yeah, it might even be the case. So that tells me that Marquette is every bit, on the same level as UConn through all year long they have been. So, I don't think they're going to win without Kolek. I think it's really, really tough for them to do so, even though it's on the road. And again, Marquette's another team's like, hey, listen, we'll worry about the Big East tournament, worry about the NCAA tournament. We need him back for that. As much as we'd love to go out and beat UConn, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. They could try to get them at Madison Square Garden on a neutral court and beat them there and cut down the nets for a Big East title. So I think it's smart to rest them. But, yeah, I don't know that UConn is leaps and bounds better than Marquette. I just don't know that we've seen the best of what Marquette has to offer yet.
Taking a look at those standings here, I should have said the odds market at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Connecticut is playing tonight and favored to win, and also favored to cut down the nets and win a national championship at a 5-1 price. Houston follows at 7-1, and also Purdue. These numbers are going to change over the final couple days in these major conferences, and also what we see out of the conference tournaments, and rightfully so. Maybe the biggest shifts here, Mark, are going to come on Selection Sunday when we take a look and see which path is going to be great as we anticipate, and some other paths that won't be as great. If we're looking at the national championship picture, obviously Connecticut is 5-1. Give us some of the teams that you're eyeing up right now, saying, you know what, I think there might be value there, or maybe grab a number before you think it actually increases or decreases at this point.
Well, look, I think Arizona is undeniable. Houston and Arizona to me are undeniable. Those are futures I already have. I just, out of principle, I feel like, Houston for me has been the number one team in the country the entire year. I think they're better than UConn, and for me, they're the team that I think has a great shot to win it all. Arizona, because of their offense, you can't deny how much they can score, and that may be enough for them to carry them through March, depending on the draw that they get. If they don't pull a very high-level defensive team, then guess what? They might not have much resistance getting there. I mentioned Marquette. Still believe in them. Creighton's shooting alone is worth a wager. One of the best shooting teams in the country, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. I think that you can absolutely find some value with Creighton because they can shoot their way through. Even when they're playing a bad defense, if the style gets slow, if they're playing a tough defensive team, guess what? Even if it's only a game in the low 60s, with the game on the line to make a shot here or there, I would trust Creighton as much as I'd trust any team in the country with the shooters that they have. And the big guy, Kyle Brenner, in the middle is enough to kind of keep defenses guessing and space the floor out. Auburn's worth a look. I don't love it. It's a pizza money bet kind of deal, right? Like just throw $15 down on it and hope you get a good return. The The SEC is so muddled, guys, and a lot of these teams are so flawed in the SEC. You don't get a real good sense of it. I mean, Tennessee, we'll see what they do tonight against South Carolina, but they lost to South Carolina already. I mean, at home. Like, that's not something I would expect to see. They give Tennessee a little bit of credit. They probably should have lost that game against Alabama. Alabama didn't go 9 minutes, or what was it, 10 and a half minutes, scoring 8 points in that game in the second half. They probably should have lost that game. So give a little bit of credit to Tennessee, but I just don't have a lot of faith in the SEC teams. I think they all kind of got warts. I mean, Tennessee would be the team I trust the most, but I think Auburn has a little bit of a higher upside, particularly on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively.
So let's go to that Tennessee and South Carolina game tonight in Columbia, a huge game that could dictate who wins the SEC regular season title outright following Alabama's loss last night in Gainesville to Florida. Tennessee in pole position and a 5.5-point road favorite tonight against Lamont Paris and his South Carolina Gamecocks. Zinno, what's your breakdown for this SEC showdown on a Wednesday?
Number does feel a little bit short. While Tennessee is 21-3 as a favorite this year, straight up, just 13-11 against the number, 4-6 ATS on the road. Gamecocks one of the best coverage in the nation at 20-8. They're 11-2 as an underdog against the number this year. And the Volunteers have covered 8 of 10 and 4-1 against the number against South Carolina over the last 3 years. Believe it or not, I'd probably lay it with SC here. Lay it with Tennessee here.
That's where it stands right now. You're laying with Tennessee, yeah.
Yeah, lay it with Tennessee.
Was a very succinct breakdown right there for the SEC showdown. To mention it, do we have even time to get to Iowa State and BYU? Maybe.
Yes, we do.
Iowa State 5.5-point home favorite tonight in Hilton against the Cougs. Zinno, 30 seconds.
Cougars have been bad away from Provo. 3-5 straight up, 2-6 against the number. 1-5 ATS as a dog, and 6-10 in conference play in the Big 12. Iowa State 17-0 straight up, 14-3 against the number. 4-0 ATS as a home favorite of between 6 and 9 tonight. I like Iowa State.
Laying 6.5 at home, the Clones against the Cougs. Now we get Zinno's thoughts on the National Football League early in the offseason. Next. The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The early line, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
This
is the Penn State
rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that lightning in a bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The Books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from three on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Yesterday was a big day in the NFL offseason calendar. The end of the franchise tag window. 9 players around the NFL tagged, others let walk to see what happens in free agency. And some that we know are going to be released. That includes Russell Wilson. We got the news earlier this week. Mark Zinno is back with us for a second consecutive segment, live right here on the early line on this Wednesday. So the Russell Wilson era in Denver, Zinno, has come to a close. Donnie and Joe reacted to that news earlier this week here on the early line and the disaster it was in Denver, possibly one of the worst trades we've ever seen in the history of the National Football League. But now we focus on Russell Wilson and what is next for him. He might come at a discount to some teams around the National Football League. So where do you believe that most likely landing spot is for Russ?
I mean, it's hard to figure. There's so many narratives out there about Russell Wilson that, sort of just don't really – I don't know how accurate they are. They just don't fit. But whether he's not liked by other guys in the locker room, whether he's a quirky guy to get along with and everything else. But there's going to be a team here that's going to take a flyer on him at a pretty cheap price and is willing to do it. It's interesting. I started to hear some rumors that the Broncos are going to trade for Sam Howell from the Commanders, opening up a spot where Russell Wilson may be in a situation where he might be fighting for a job with a rookie quarterback in Washington. And that could end up coming to fruition. I still think the Raiders are a very live team for any quarterback that is out there, whether it's Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. I mean, guys, objectively, if you watched Denver last year, Russell Wilson proved he can still play. Through the first 10 weeks of the season, he was top 5 in completion percentage, top 5 in passing touchdowns, top 5 in quarterback rating. He did not play poorly last year by any stretch of the imagination. So this isn't about performance. This is about personality. It's about fit. It's about cost. It's about a lot of other things that don't necessarily, come to fruition on a football field. And that makes things hard to handicap from where he's going to end up. I mean, is it possible if the Giants move off Daniel Jones that they sign Russell Wilson and use their top draft pick in a position? I mean, does that feel like it could happen? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It's really hard to figure out where he lands here, but I think somebody's going to come out of the woodwork and do something unexpected and bring Russell Wilson into the fold.
Yeah, moving on from Russell Wilson probably is the right move, but also, how much does he have left in the tank when an NFL team is willing to eat $80+ million in dead cap space over the next 2 seasons? But also, Mark, to your point, this is an interesting thing. It wasn't as if you gave up a 7th-round pick and assumed that entire contract on your franchise. You're going to get Russell Wilson for the price of, Brock Purdy right now. Not to say you're going to get the same type of production, but a guy of that ilk that can say, you know what, I can throw 30 touchdown passes, turn it over less than 10 times here, and you get that for $1 million. But also, let me ask you this question. Let's just say Russell Wilson doesn't find his exact team or a team doesn't want to bring him in. Hey, look, we're going with the younger quarterback situation. What are the chances that Russ sits out September and October with a Joe Flacco situation where, let's just say the San Francisco 49ers lose Brock Purdy to an injury? Russell Wilson coming off the bench and being a capable quarterback, and again, $3 to $4 million prorated could be huge. Is there a scenario in your mind where Russ doesn't even start week 1 in the NFL with a team?
Sure, but again, every year in training camp, quarterbacks go down. They just do. Like, knock on wood, I'm not wishing it on any particular franchise, but, by the time they get through the third preseason game, my guess is Russell Wilson would have a home, whether it's just as a backup and insurance. Now, remember this too, guys, even if he gets past there, once you get through week 1, none of the players' salary is guaranteed. So week 2 is another signing period for free agents because none of the money will be guaranteed against the cap. There'll be no dead money as soon as you cut the guy. Whatever you owe him is already been paid and everything else is off the cap. So that is a situation where he might not get signed through training camp. Somebody might pick him up after week 1 from a pure backup scenario just to see what happens. So there's a lot of time yet and a lot of things are going to unfold. We'll have to wait and see how it all happens.
That's the interesting thing about Russell Wilson, in my estimation, the value that he brings with him. You're going to get him at a discount. You're not going to have to pay the huge money that Denver did. Is it worth it to think that he can compete for a starting quarterback position? Is he a reliable backup? Would Russ want to be in that position? All of these questions to be answered this offseason around Russell Wilson. Again, yesterday, a big day in the National Football League offseason calendar, the end of the franchise tag window. 6 guys yesterday, Zinno, placed under the franchise tag. We saw 2 more under the tag earlier in this 2-week window. The Chiefs tagging L'Jarius Sneed, the Bengals tagging the wide receiver T. Higgins, and the Patriots placing the transition tag on Kyle Duggar. Of the names that I have listed and the 6 that I hope we can show you on this board in just a moment, which name, which player stands out to you the most?
I mean, look, there's always a desire for edge rushers, right? Like between Josh Allen and Brian Burns, somebody's going to come calling for guys who can get to the quarterback. I think that's always a premium position that you're going to look to try to fill no matter what happens. So from that standpoint, I think those 2 guys would be at the top of the list, depending. A guy like Matabuke feels like it's a fit position, right? Who's looking for that interior defensive lineman who can fill a gap? Who's looking for that guy that can, help the edge rusher that they already have, take away a double team just because they're so dominant inside. So I don't know if the market is as big. I think those D tackles obviously are highly paid and highly compensated, and he would be given the kind of player that he is. But I put those guys first. I mean, wide receivers in and of themselves, they always will find a home. It's just a question of who wants them and how much they're willing to pay for them when it's time for those guys to sign.
Let's take a look at some of those non-tag players, which, quite frankly, we're always looking now at the running back position. Quality free agent class, maybe the best free agent class we've ever seen at the running back position, because it looks like you can get a deal on them. The Giants setting off into free agency, or Saquon Barkley saying, we can come back if we can agree to a deal. Jacobs now on the free agent market here. If we're taking a look at some of those running backs here, do we think there's going to be a market that develops? Or, Mark, we might be looking at midway through the summer, these superstar running backs still trying to find a home out here?
No, I think these guys all get signed before camp. I mean, when it comes to running backs like these guys, somebody's going to pony up the dough to a point where they're going to be comfortable signing, and they're going to structure a contract. And that's really what it's all about for running backs, right? It's about making them feel good and making them feel like they got a big deal. It's all about the structure for the team. You could sign Saquon Barkley to a 4-year, $64 million deal and let him feel like he's getting $16 million. But the structure all depends on how it goes. It's so much funny money in a lot of these running back contracts, which is the way it should be structured. If you play and you produce and you stay healthy, you'll stay on the roster. I had a good friend in the industry say, hey, send Saquon Barkley to Baltimore. I'm like, why? So he can add to the list of running backs who are injured in Baltimore every year when they play? I mean, that's just what it feels like. Saquon has played a good part of the games in his career for the Giants. You can't take that away from him. He's been more healthy than not, at least than expected. But all these running backs are going to need to be part of a team and in a camp at some point in time if they want to start the season somewhere. And at some point in time, these running backs are going to have to succumb to the idea that, look, this is what the market is. I better sign and play because there's no chance my value goes up as the season goes along. Because what happens, guys, as soon as they start snapping the ball and giving it to a 6th-round pick who can put up yards every week, guess what? I don't need that guy. I got a guy right here who can put up 100 yards a game. What am I going to go pay this guy for? So their value's not going to go up as time goes down the road. They got to sign and get in camp quickly.
And just for reference, Dalvin Cook last offseason into training camp signed a 1-year, $5.8 million deal, fully guaranteed with the New York Jets. You're not looking at huge money, but you're looking at however that contract is structured at the running back spot. Zinno, the name at the top of the list for players who were not tagged, Baker Mayfield. The Buccaneers placing the franchise tag on the safety, Antoine Winfield Jr. They will let Baker Mayfield go into free agency. I say go in air quotes because I ask you, is Baker Mayfield going to be the week 1 starting quarterback for Tampa Bay next season?
Yeah. I mean, I feel sorry for the poor suckers who actually sign him. I've seen this movie before. I know how this script ends. I saw this from Baker Mayfield when he was focused and young and hungry and wanted to win football games and wanted to be a football player when he was on the bench to start his career in Cleveland and then came in late and actually played like a serviceable or above serviceable quarterback in the NFL. After being kicked around for the last few years and realizing that his mouth and his ego were way too big, he got relegated to be a starter in Tampa Bay where he could only beat out Kyle Trask. Guess what? He played really well, played like an above-average starter in this league, and guess what? The minute you sign him to a deal and pay him, cocky Baker Mayfield is going to be back, and the performance is going to dip, and we're going to see how this thing plays out all over again. I just don't trust the fact that he's humble enough and smart enough to stay focused and go play football instead of worrying about running his mouth and the bravado and being the good soundbite and everything else. I don't know that he's got that yet. If he does, we haven't seen it, but I've seen this script before from Baker Mayfield where it becomes all about him and the play takes a nosedive.
Yeah, owners talk, general managers talk. So there's a reason why Baker Mayfield is like, okay, you'll go into free agency and we'll probably look to be bringing you back here because the market for Baker Mayfield outside of Tampa Bay may not be what it is. It almost feels to me a little bit like, and maybe it's not the same exact scenario, where you take a look at the Giants and what they were doing last year at the quarterback position with Daniel Jones, where laughing stock here on the early line when it was me and Kevin, we're saying like nobody's offering him $1 million a year, but let alone the Giants creating their own market for $40 million a year. It'd be interesting to see if there is any free agency connections to any other teams to sort of drive that price up. But again, just like Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs, these teams are confident that they're going to bring that player back because it's a good scenario for the player and the football team as they appear. They just have to come up with a number that makes some sense here. Now, talking about coming up with numbers here at the FanDuel Sportsbook, new odds markets here, which mean, yeah, we want to see who the number 1 pick is, the number 2 and the number 3 pick will be here, Mark. But how about this? The number 4 overall pick, assuming the quarterbacks are gone. The leaders in the clubhouse right now, the odds-wise market here, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. at a minus 230 price. It's Neighbors at a plus 850 price. If I gave you a free pick here, number 4 overall, who's getting drafted there?
Jaden Daniels. Somebody will move up and grab him. I mean, why not? Like, it wouldn't shock me if 4 quarterbacks went in a row, would it? Like, I mean, honestly. Like, at some point in time, what you have to worry about, when the top 3 guys go, somebody's going to get nervous and jump in and go get him at number 4, right? Or you're assuming he's going to get 3.
Yeah.
I love 15
yeah, so
to
who's
1.
going 3 if Jaden?
Come on.
Well,
1, Caleb, 2, Drake May, 3, Jaden Daniels, just based on the odds right now, not overall assessment, just based on the odds. Or is there another quarterback, you think could go in front of Jaden Daniels?
Or somebody could trade up and go get Marvin ahead of him, right? I mean, it's one of those things where somebody always gets nervous at the draft, and what we've seen in recent years at least, and pulls the trigger. When it comes to guys that you want at the top of the draft, you don't wait. I mean, the philosophy of drafting is always true. If the guy is there and you want him, you move heaven and earth to go get him. And that's really what it boils down to. I think in general, when it comes down to it, there are a bunch of players or a bunch of GMs out there that are willing to risk everything to go get the guy that they want that really feels going to be a difference maker. So I wouldn't shock me if Harrison went in the top 3. Do the Patriots look like a franchise right now where they are, that they are immune from moving out of 3 and letting somebody else go up there and get somebody?
Yes, in my estimation, because Gerard Mayo in his introductory press conference said we're drafting the most important position in football, which would be the quarterback. But I don't disagree that there is going to be some movement, and these odds are going to move because of it as well. Mark Zinno, we appreciate the time. We round out this second hour next. The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The early line. Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is the Penn State rule.
Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage Late
sort
Night.
of has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We round out this second hour live right here on the early line on SportsGrid. It's a Wednesday all across the Spiz Grizz. I am Ben. He is Donnie. And this is the SportsGrid app, the ultimate sports betting companion app, available for download at both the Apple and the Play Store. You can scan that QR code on your screen in a matter of moments. All of our insight and information in the palm of your hand. We love hearing from the people. To end out a second hour, as we are just a week and a half away from Selection Sunday, and after a big win for the Boilermakers on the road last night in Champaign, how far will Purdue go this NCAA tournament? It was the question in Fade the Public. Donnie right side, the Purdue Boilermakers have failed to make the Final Four since 1980. That is now 43 years, more than 4 decades, since Purdue has been in a Final Four. Will the Boilermakers reach the Final Four this season? That was the question at SportsGrid TV on Twitter. Yes or no? And most people saying no. More than 64% of the public saying no. I am fading the public. What about you?
Before the stinger came up there, Ben, I think you let it slip there. Maybe a Freudian slip, as you said, don't by accident here. So do you really think subconsciously you think Purdue can actually get to the Final Four? That was the truth, Sam, right there. So whatever your vote is, I got to go back to say what you actually said. But here, I'm fading the public as well. I picked yes. I'm trying to remove myself from the past couple years and take a look at how much better this basketball team, I believe, is than the previous years. And also, if you are the number 1 overall seed, you're supposed to be getting the easier path. And also, Ben, we didn't ask if they could win a championship. This is just getting to the Final Four. So I voted yes. I'm with the 35% squad out here right now.
Me as well. Freudian slip be damned. It is Purdue and only do. There is no try. There is only do. And that is Purdue this year. Not just a Final Four, but a national championship. We'll talk more about it when Hour 3 starts in 55 seconds.